Hey there, welcome back to Drummer Daily. Hope you're doing all right. I've got another question today from a listener, and I thought, why not just keep going on the listener question train. I answered one of these in my last episode, a question that I got, and I figured as long as you are asking questions, you're telling me what you want me to podcast about, why don't I actually answer your questions? So I'm going to answer a question from listener Jamie, and he writes in and he wrote a really great email with a lot of info and a lot of backstory, but I want to skip to the question that he asked because I think he definitely has some struggles that I think we all could relate to, but I also think that at a much more basic level that he is asking a question that I think a lot of us have asked before, or even if he's not asking the exact question, he's basing his question on a thought that I know many of us have. And so his question was, he's got another job and he is definitely wanting to become a professional drummer. And so he asked, how do I go about creating and getting work as a professional drummer when I don't know anyone, and what should my main focus be when I move? He's talking about moving to a different city with a better music career, and so he's talking about moving to make better use of his time and to get to know people. And so he asked, what would be the most efficient use of my time, and as far as getting to know people, and how do I make this thing happen without getting to know, or without knowing anyone already? And I definitely feel your pain there, Jamie. That's something that I definitely I realize that I grew up in a music city, basically. I grew up here in Nashville, and I was surrounded by people who did something in the music business one way or the other, and that are my friends. My friends, their parents did, or something like that. And I will tell you, in high school and as a younger age, obviously I played in bands with my friends, had a lot of fun. But what's funny is, like, now, I don't know if I've told this story before on the podcast, but I probably had 30 or 40 friends, maybe fewer, but a good number of friends who I thought were good enough to make it, quote unquote, in the music business in varying things, various things. But and we lived in Nashville, so they had the talent, they had the ability, they lived in the right place, but they still didn't make it happen. And so that's a story for another episode of the podcast. The reason why most of these people didn't make it happen was because they just didn't stick with it long enough. And the ones from my kind of high school class that did make things happen, they're the ones who stuck with it, even when it didn't make much sense. And I'm not telling you to be unwise, but I am saying that you do need to have a certain level of determination, and making taking solid steps towards becoming a professional drummer if that's what you want to do. So you need to be taking real actions toward your results that you want, but also you just got to stick with it. And these people didn't stick with it. All of that to say that where I'm at now as a drummer, I don't know. I don't get any gigs from those people, and in fact, most of the gigs that I get come from a couple of different places, and they were from people that I didn't know even a few years ago, and none of them were people that I targeted for relationships. Now, I do get some gigs from people that I've worked towards working with, and there's a process to that as well. But I will say that the people that I work with now, I didn't know many of them 5 or 6 years ago for sure, it happened naturally. And so one thing that I will encourage you at a broad level to do if you want to get to know more people is to start looking at how you can be a good friend. One of the kind of the principles that I hang my hat on is that you have to be willing to serve others. That's really the goal. You got to be a good person, be a good friend, serve others well, and that's how you start getting called for gigs. It might seem overly simplistic or utopian, but the reality is people hire the kinds of people that they want to work with. They do care about your drumming, but they really want to hire someone they know is a good guy. And if you can show other people that you're a good person to be around and that you're a good hang and that you are kind and considerate, that stuff actually works. So do that. Now, the second thing is this. You don't need to live in a quote-unquote music city. I used to think that, I had it good because I lived in Nashville when I was a kid, and I hadn't kind of really started a pursuit of a real career. Now, I will say as a teenager, I did get paying gigs as a drummer. I don't know if that was more to do with the people I happened to know or if it actually was living in Nashville. But, even as a kid, I'd hear stories about people moving to LA and waiting tables until they made it big. And so I thought I needed to do that to not move to LA, but I thought, okay, I'm going to have to live here in Nashville for a while and struggle before I can make it big. But I think that most of that idea of moving to a big city and then waiting for your big break basically comes from the idea that you have to get lucky in order to make it as a musician, as a professional musician. And I definitely don't believe that luck plays into things. If you've attended one of my master classes, hopefully you believe that now too after I've kind of walked you through that. And I believe the listener who wrote this in, actually, I believe he has attended my master class, but maybe you haven't. But I strongly believe, and I think it's true, that you don't need to be lucky to become a professional drummer. You need to follow a process. So I think that the idea of moving to a music city is more, or a city where there's a lot of music production happening, is more of a myth, and it's based on the idea that you have to be lucky. It's also based on movies you might see or stories you'd hear about so-and-so, getting discovered, in Hollywood by a director or whatever, I was the waiter at the bar and the director walked in and saw me and said, that face, whatever it is. So I don't think that really is realistic for how most professional musicians get gigs. And I will say this, a lot of my work, even though I live in Nashville, a lot of my work comes from outside of Nashville. So you got to think about, social media and the ability for every musician who's out there to communicate who they are as a person, as a player. I use social media in that way. I want to communicate who I am as a drummer and kind of my musical pursuits. And the thing is this, most producers that I know here in Nashville, they're not looking just in Nashville for drummers either. They're looking outside of Nashville. They're looking online at other places in order to find drummers to hire. So the people here in Nashville even know that drummers can create great tracks basically wherever they are. It doesn't matter where you live when it comes time to tour. If you're looking to go the touring route, it doesn't matter where you live. My wife actually started out her music career going on the road with some artists, doing the managing kind of thing, and she didn't live anywhere close to Nashville, but she still got a gig doing it. So you don't have to live in a city to do this thing. And it actually hit me the other day that most of my work that I do in my house. Actually, I do a lot of recording in my house. And that could really be located anywhere in the world. And so, the world's a different place now than it used to be. And a lot of the stories that we're reading about people moving somewhere to make it big, they're based on kind of the old world mentality. They're not based on how things happen now, which is the internet is a beautiful thing and social media is a beautiful thing. And you really can, if you want to communicate yourself out there, put yourself out there as a drummer, you need to do that. And the other thing is this, if you are going to put yourself out there as a drummer, put yourself out there in a professional setting within the context of a song, with you playing the kind of music you want to play for a living. Don't just put a bunch of drum cover videos up and you just doing a bunch of solos and crazy freeform jazz or whatever if you want to play rock. Put yourself out there playing the kind of music that you want to be playing professionally, and then do a good job at it. Show yourself serving the song and serving the other band members if you're playing with a band. Just show that you can actually do this thing for real. Put across the perception that you already are a professional. Don't lie and say you are if you're not, but I'm saying put yourself forward in a way that reflects your values as a drummer and who you want to be. And you might get a lot of mileage out of that. So that's a great question, and I hope you guys have all been inspired by this and you feel like you got a little bit of information about some steps maybe you can take if you feel like you don't have much of a hope of being a drummer because you don't live in a city with a bunch of production. Start thinking about your online presence and how you're putting yourself out there as a drummer, and whether or not you even are putting yourself out there as a drummer. And start taking steps to do that if you're not, and do it in a way that really accurately reflects not only who you are as a drummer, but who you want to be as a drummer. So I hope that helps you today. Thanks for listening. We'll talk again soon. Bye for now.